Hey everyone, thank you so much for your patience. I'm Maya May and I am here with Stuart Stevens, and this is our Lincoln Project Town Hall focused on Pennsylvania, which we all know is a state that is critical to maintaining our democracy. And if we also know, if you've been paying attention, that there's a lot of lunacy going on there. And so we're going to talk about that tonight. We have one of our union partners with us from Turn Pennsylvania Blue. So we're going to be talking to them about their efforts on the ground and how you can get involved. So definitely stay tuned for information on that. But this is incredibly exciting. Stuart, Pennsylvania's crazy. Before we bring Colleen in, can we just talk really briefly about why Pennsylvania is so critical to democracy?
Well, look, I worked for the last Republican governor who was reelected there, Tom Ridge, and I think both of us would find it difficult to recognize the Republican Party as it is in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, the Lincoln Project did a very interesting thing that I wasn't involved in, so I can praise it to the skies without being immodest. Went through all the races in the country and targeted them, which you have to do in any political organization, as you know, targeted them by a democracy filter. Which is the greatest threat to democracy? And the number one race was the governor's race in Pennsylvania. And why is that? Well, you have a guy who not only is an insurrectionist, not only paid for people to go to the insurrection, not only a guy who lied to the FBI about his role, but a guy who has said when he appoints the Secretary of State, which you do in Pennsylvania, that he will appoint someone who will pretty much make sure that the person he wants to win in the next presidential race will win.
That doesn't sound like democracy to me.
Listen, having done a lot of races, it's a lot easier if you can do that. If you can just put somebody in place and go like, we don't have to worry about this vote thing, right? I mean, it's, Pennsylvania is a big state. It's a lot of electoral colleges, a lot of electoral votes. And it was one of the key states that went from Trump to Biden. So, it's a tremendously important race.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that race as well as the Fetterman Oz race. But before we do that, let's bring in somebody who's very much affected by what's going on in Pennsylvania, an organizer with Turn Pennsylvania Blue. Hello, Colleen Wynn. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Can you give us just a little summary about what your organization does and what you're doing on the ground right now?
Sure. We are a PAC organization, and we work with volunteers all across the state to work where the party can't and to really do grassroots work, knocking doors, making phone calls, doing texting, basically anything you can think of to get out the vote for Democrats on the ballot.
I like the way you put that, working where perhaps the Democratic Party cannot and helping to assist, like plugging those holes. It's very important. We talked briefly right before the show, voter deadlines, registration deadlines are coming up. Mail-in ballots are already being mailed in. Can you give us a quick overview on the deadlines and so people know what's coming up?
Sure. The deadline to request your mail-in ballot is November 1st. Mm-hmm. We don't recommend waiting that long. We know how slow the postal system is nowadays after Trump.
Yeah, no last minute stuff. No procrastinating.
We don't recommend doing that, but it is a thing. Like, please, we love when people vote by mail because it's quick and easy and makes it a lot easier for you.
But they have to request it. Just specifically, they have to request it. They don't just
get it. You have to request it. You can do it online. It's so super easy. Our governor made that possible. It's great. But the registration deadline to vote is 2 weeks before the election, so that's coming up pretty quick too. Please do
that's it. October 25th. We had to reverse.
We need everyone we can get. Yeah.
So that's October 25th, but also
October 25th. Yes.
Do not wait till the last minute for that. And I like that you pointed out that your governor made that possible. That's something that it sounds like Mastriano would not make possible, Stuart. So why don't we just jump into talking about the governor's race, Shapiro v. Mastriano?
Well, this is one of these races that in the political consulting world we would call a leading indicator. If Mastriano does win this race, it's going to be a very, very bad night for Democrats. Now, I think the guy should lose. I think he is going to lose. He's running this sort of underground campaign. Colleen could speak to it better than I. But I think that what he is counting on is a tremendous turnout of low propensity white voters. And that's why he's working all of these sort of dog whistles to get these voters out. I think the greatest danger that we have, and again, Colleen could really speak to this better than I, is a complacency. If the numbers in the Democratic areas turn out, this race should be a slam dunk for Shapiro. It's also a chance, and I find this interesting, and I'd be interested to see what Colleen says about it. He has a very attractive running mate who is African-American, lieutenant governor, who I think is a state senator, Colleen, from West PA, outside of Pittsburgh, from a predominantly or majority white district. And it would be the first chance to elect an African-American lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania.
Actually, the African-American candidate lost. Is Carrie Del Rosso is the
candidate. Yeah. But running with Shapiro.
Yeah, she's white.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's okay.
There's a lot of races going on.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
I said that Colleen would know a lot
there
more.
was a woman running who would have been, but now she did not.
I said that Colleen would know a lot more about this than me. I didn't know she'd know that much more. But it's really, when you look at somebody like Tom Ridge, to Mastriano, I mean, it's just an extraordinary decline in a party. I think that he should lose, but the surest way to do it is not to take it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, with polling, Colleen, it looks like Shapiro is polling pretty well, plus 11, but you're actually out there on the ground with the people, interacting with people, canvassing. Are people excited to get out the vote for Shapiro? Does that feel like it's happening?
Yes, absolutely. And I knock a lot of doors. I knock a lot of Republican doors. And even the Republicans are pretty disgusted with where the PA GOP is right now. I spent a lot of time at the polling place on primary day, and I actually had, my committee person who's the Republican version of me at the polling place. And he said, I promise we're not all like him. And that's really the vibe that I get on the doors talking to Republican voters. Yeah.
That's really good to hear, because at this level, it should be like, aren't you embarrassed? And so to hear that is incredible. But are the Democrats motivated, like truly motivated to put it, like they're excited about it? Because that's where we're concerned about, right? Is that voter turnout?
Yes, absolutely. They're very motivated to beat Mastriano, especially. And Fetterman too. I mean, they're excited about the Senate race. Our cause right now is getting them to vote all the way down the ballot. So,
okay, yeah.
Colleen, can I ask you a question? Are you sensing a increased intensity among pro-choice female voters? And are you seeing it in your registration numbers? And any inclination of how it's going to turn out with early voting?
We definitely see that on both sides of the ticket, both sides of the aisle, honestly. Like we've even had a lot of college educated Republican women who are very scared in Pennsylvania. There was a stat the other day that the highest number of newly registered voters after Dobbs was actually dads. And they're registering with Democrat for a reason. They see what could happen if we let Mastriano in, and if we don't flip the state house.
Yeah, I was actually just at the march, the women's march in DC, and saw more dads there than they did last year. Like last year, it was like a lot of boyfriends who maybe been forced to go to the march kind of thing. Yeah. Whereas this time, we were seeing a lot of families marching together, and it being very much a family issue.
And Colleen, let me ask you this: are you seeing much of a split ticket phenomenon?
I'm not
who want to vote for Shapiro but don't want to vote for Fetterman.
I'm not. I think I've seen a lot of people who have questions about Fetterman more than anything, but it's usually a pretty easy conversation to convince them. Sorry, my kids are.
I just
No,
love
I
the
love this.
multitasking because literally this is just symbolic of the way we're able
This
to.
could become famous on the internet if it'll just come into the
Yeah,
shot. I mean,
yes.
It's an easy conversation to make them realize that voting for Fetterman is just as important. And also dispelling some of the myths that they have heard because of the advertisements happening in that race too. So,
and are Fetterman and Oz, Oz and Mastriano avoiding each other on the campaign trail?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, well, we'd think, right? Like, what would happen if Oz were to appear with a Mastriano right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're at the point where we're everybody's trying to tie their Republican opponent to Mastriano because he's that bad. So,
yeah, I mean, it would be lovely to see if he could like tank the entire party. Because if are people actually asking the Republican candidates to speak on what Mastriano is doing and saying? Because this is a guy who is, he took money, $5,000 from Gab, which I don't know if you're familiar with Gab. It's an anti-Semitic website. And it's linked to
he was actually thrown out of the caucus in the state Senate until he became the nominee for governor. So that tells you what the Republicans actually think of Doug Mastriano.
Got it. So not a single one of them want him, but yet would they all rally behind him if he were to win?
Probably. Yeah. Yes.
I mean,
100%. Yes.
Yeah. I feel like Stuart, you would be able to speak to that. I mean,
most of our the state house Republican incumbents voted with him at least 90% of the time.
Okay. So this is a race where we can move on from this race because we're pretty sure that it's going to be okay. So we'll move on for this one. But let's talk about Fetterman Oz, because as we were just talking about earlier, right before the show, now the new PAC, that Trump, affiliated PAC, they're sending a ton of money on anti-Fetterman ads, attack ads. And so are you seeing any effect from that?
I personally haven't seen any of those yet. I watched the Eagles game last night. That's pretty much the only time I watch regular news and regular TV anymore as a millennial. But there were some Fetterman attack ads against Fetterman and lots of pro Oz ads. But they're all saying the same thing, and most of it isn't true. And we just need to talk to people and make sure they know that it's not true.
What does a pro Oz ad even sound like?
I was actually talking with my coworkers earlier today because we were laughing about how he said, I'm a doctor and I'm worried that all of the stress is causing heart disease in Pennsylvania.
So was he alluding? Was he alluding in a way to Fetterman's stroke, do you think?
Probably, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, from what I've seen, and we've had Giselle Fetterman on our show, We're Speaking, and it's like such a lovely family. And here you have Oz coming from, Jersey. That messaging is something that we're hearing I'm all the way in California. I'm hearing that messaging. Yeah. Are Pennsylvanians, when you're talking to people, and Republicans included, how are they feeling about an Oz trying to kind of like wheedle his way into Pennsylvania politics?
Not good. I think that the Fetterman campaign's done a really good job of making him an outsider, because he is, and making it very clear to people. The crudité thing was just, people see him as a rich white guy from New Jersey.
Okay. I mean, that's good. Go ahead, Stuart.
I don't know if I've ever seen a race that had such a disparity between a guy who love him, hate him. The guy is the most authentic guy, out there on the ballot, right? I mean, the guy hasn't changed anything. As a consultant, if you're working for somebody like that, you have to just embrace it. And what I love about the Fetterman campaign is they haven't tried to change the guy.
Nope.
Which probably would, he probably would have told you to, take a walk if you tried to. But, and versus one of the most phony individuals. I mean, this Botoxed kind of weirdo guy who, doesn't know where he's from, without selling miracle cures.
Yeah.
It's just such a tangible difference. I mean, if the two of them walked into a room, just the difference in their sort of aspect, how you would relate to them, who you could talk to, or walk in a grocery store, as we famously saw. But how do you feel about the race, Colleen? How are you feeling good about it?
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I do think that Fetterman is doing a really good job appealing to blue collar Pennsylvania's working families, which is something that Dr. Oz can't do, just cannot do. Like, it's not something that he is capable of. And when I talk to voters on the doors, they do have questions about some of the things they're seeing in those ads. But when we are able to actually talk to voters and explain what's going on, and actually hear from organizers and hear from people who actually know the truth, then we're good.
Well, and
I feel good about it, to be honest.
That's really good to hear, because we're less than 30 days out right now. But we know the Republicans are trying to hit Fetterman on crime, which and are you seeing that resonate with voters?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is explaining to somebody what, like, the number of times I've had to explain what felony murder is to somebody is not something you would expect in, when you're talking about a U.S. Senate race. But here we are.
and here we are. But Stuart, when we're thinking about like the kitchen table issues and the things that are affecting Pennsylvanians, do you think there's something that the Democrats could or should be doing in Pennsylvania right now to really highlight what Fetterman is doing for the state? Because he's the lieutenant governor right now.
Yeah. Look, I believe, if I ran the Democratic Party, God help us, but if I did run the Democratic Party, I would try to put democracy on the ballot. I would make this a referendum as much as I could on democracy. And when people say, well, that doesn't poll as well as something else, I think it's up to each campaign to lead voters to what they think is important. Get them to invest in what you think. I don't remember seeing hope and change as the #1 issue in America in 2007. But, Barack Obama did a brilliant job making it an issue. And particularly, it seems to me in Pennsylvania, the birthplace of democracy, has this resonance of really inventing America. And it's difficult to talk about this stuff without sounding alarmist. It reminds me kind of like a pandemic, that whatever you say at the beginning will sound alarmist, but at the end will prove to be inadequate. It really, democracy is at stake here. And what just is so shocking about Mastriano is he's just open about it. There's no pretense here. There's no bait and switch. And it's almost by talking about it, this is sort of a Trump thing. If you just talk about it, it becomes normal, because obviously people aren't going to talk about stuff that they shouldn't talk about. So if you're talking about it, it's okay to talk about it. It's this weird sort of normalization that occurs. So I would be talking about that a lot and making sure that people understood the stakes. And Oz it's just a vanity candidacy. There is no reason this guy is running for the U.S. Senate other than vanity.
Right.
He doesn't want to help people. He has no issue agenda. If he thought that if Donald Trump was a Trotskyite, he'd be a Trotskyite. There's no ideology here. He can't articulate a theory of government. He can't tell you what he really believes in. It's just marketing, any more than he really believed that if you took these miracle pills, some miracle would happen. I'm glad. That's what I would talk about. I would talk about what are the stakes, because I think the higher the stakes, the better the Democrats are going to do across the country. That if you allow yourself as a Democrat to get sucked into these little issues, I think that you're not going to win a race that's about inflation. You're not going to win a race that's about gas prices. I think that you could lose a race about that. But I think you have to make the race about something that is winnable. You have to put yourself in a position to win. So I think that's why it's so great that the president's talking about democracy now. I thought that was a brilliant speech that he gave. And
I would go so far as to say not just even democracy, but decency. Like, what is it? What is it to be a decent human?
yeah,
I saw earlier today. Now the Promise Keepers are trying to redefine what Jesus is, and Jesus is mean, apparently, according to them. And so it's insane. Go check out the clip
Yeah.
later because it's wild. But I'm glad we are talking about this in particular because I want to turn to some of our audience questions. And so, Colleen, you're there, you're on the ground. This is a question from Jennifer M. She asks, how can we reach Pennsylvanians who have just tuned out traditional news and only get their information from algorithm-driven sources? You're on the ground, you know what the local sources are, maybe the neighbors chatting amongst each other. How are people getting their information, and do you have any recommendations on a better way for people to communicate with each other?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's like a lot of it is coming from algorithms. It's Facebook, it's TikTok, it's Twitter, Instagram, even like all of that. I think the best way to get through it is to talk to your neighbors personally. I'm a big fan of grassroots organizing, and I think knocking doors and actually talking to folks is the best way to get through that. We just did a whole series of women to women phone calls that were hugely impactful, and we had incredible conversations. It doesn't even need to be about a candidate specific thing, but when you can just talk to folks about issues that matter and lead them in the right direction, it makes a difference.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially like post-pandemic, like we're missing that human, face-to-face interaction. I think it's harder to do, but I think it's that much more necessary. That's what I love about Fetterman's campaign is it does seem super relatable. Like he's out there, like he looks like that guy that's like, oh, I want to hang out with him. Like I want to hang out with the Fettermans.
Yeah.
Stuart, did you have anything you wanted to add on that one? Otherwise,
no, I mean,
yeah,
politics is very, very, very often, more often than not, a game of small numbers. And your ability to bring, 5 people to the polls, to talk to your neighbors, talk to people that you're standing in grocery lines with if you feel like there's some opening, that sort of stuff, for all the money in politics and all the sort of technology, there is nothing that is more persuasive. And it's just so critical that we realize that every vote here can make a difference. Because really, the only way I think that these races are lost in Pennsylvania is if people think they can't be lost, which I think happened a lot to Donald Trump. Donald Trump has always benefited from the inability to imagine Donald Trump. You couldn't imagine a guy who talked in public about having sex with his daughter being the Republican nominee. You couldn't imagine the person after Hollywood tape came out being president of the United States. And I think that hurt Clinton. I think she left a lot of votes on the table because people felt that they didn't have to vote for her. Biden was able to ratchet up some of those, and he racked up more votes than any other candidate for president. So I think a big turnout here in this election will be a really positive sign for Democrats.
Yeah, don't forget those voter registration deadlines, y'all. Those are coming up. I'm going to reiterate that throughout the show. I want to go to another audience question, specifically around the fact that failure of imagination, right? Because right now we're not worried about Mastriano, or sort of, because it's like, oh, he seems like the crazy candidate.
Yeah.
But Richard D has a question, which I think highlights this, is why is the governor's race so competitive? Even though Mastriano has touted his involvement in January 6th insurrection and affiliates with white supremacists and anti-Semites, what part of the PA population is he appealing to, or are Republicans holding their nose to vote for them? Are the Republicans voting for this? Like, are you hearing that?
I mean, yeah, I live in Cumberland County, which is in the middle of the state, and part of Doug Mastriano's part of my county is part of his state senate district. So he was very involved in the open PA, like anti-COVID, COVID denying groups. The Moms of Liberty crowd just loves him. A lot of our we're already talking about school board races next year, and a lot of the same talking points are things that came from Mastriano himself.
Wow.
So there's a lot of that happening.
Yeah, if people aren't familiar with Moms for Liberty, it's basically like if the PTA met the KKK and had a group together. That's
That's a great description.
yeah. That's every time I'm like, this
Yeah.
is basically a hate group pretending to be of concerned parents, and I'm like, absolutely not.
You know, I think this is something about Trump and Mastriano and these candidates. You know, we grew up in believing that politics was about appealing to your better selves, that it was something you had to aspire to, better angels or whatever. And what Trump has done, and it's gone all through these MAGA races, is it's taken the worst part of us and said that that's our best part. That little part of you that feels like for road rage, someone passes you, like you can't let that person do that because then you're a sucker. And once it's easy to be that person because it doesn't take anything out of you. You don't have to aspire to anything. But it is so antithetical to every sort of value system that we've had in our culture. I mean, no teacher tells their kids to be like that, no scout leader, no coach. But it's a legitimization of a victim anger that I think is very seductive once you legitimize it. And racism is right in there with it. And it's just so important to remind people that, this whole idea is supposed to be about that which is the best of us, not the worst of us.
I'm so glad you pointed that out because Pennsylvania is a diverse state, right? And so in order for this multiracial democracy to function, there needs to be that empathy. There needs to be that best of us. Eric W. has a question that might touch on this a little bit. Eric W. asks, how has the Pennsylvania voting populace changed since 2020? And what can we do to keep up the momentum after the midterms? Have you seen that, Colleen? Is the population changing?
Yeah, I think we're seeing record numbers of younger people registering, which is very exciting. And the momentum, we're already working on 2023, which is some people are a little surprised to hear that, but I've got a candidate training happening in 2 weeks already for school board candidates. We're working a lot with groups that recruit younger candidates and get younger people involved, like Run for Something. The electorate and the people involved are more female and a lot younger than they were, in 2016 or before. So, yeah.
Tommy, let me ask you, when I was working in Pennsylvania in the Ridge years, the issue of brain drain, of young people having to leave Pennsylvania to find jobs, was something that parents felt that it was this, tremendous problem that their kids couldn't get the job they wanted to. One of the things I think is understated, if you get someone like Mastriano, what it's going to do to the economy. I mean, tell me which Fortune 500 company is going to want to move to a state where somebody doesn't believe that Joe Biden is president of the United States. Yeah. It's going to be critical. So do you hear that now? I assume.
Yeah, I'm actually curious about that too, because the tech sector in Pittsburgh is pretty, you've got Duolingo there. It's a pretty robust, are they kind of getting involved with this as well?
I'm not entirely sure if they are, but I can see in my own neighborhood and I live right near Harrisburg City that I don't think people can afford to leave at this point. That's where we're at. Young people want healthcare. They want access to healthcare. They want affordable housing, and a governor like Mastriano is not going to give them that. That's for sure. So
yeah, well, and also Oz doesn't seem like somebody who appeals to any youth whatsoever. I can't imagine. All right, I'm glad that you're confirming this. I can tell, you're confirming a lot of what I'm like. Okay, we're going to be okay. The youth. We keep talking about how Gen Z is going to save us, but I do like the energy that we're seeing come from them. We have a few more questions, so I just want to turn to a couple of those, but we do need to talk just a little bit about one more race in Pennsylvania 8. That's where we have Matt Cartwright, the incumbent in Bognet. Stuart, we were talking earlier when I asked you, I was like, this race, should we talk about it? And you're like, yeah, I want to talk about it.
Listen, it's not often I have someone running for Congress who used to work for me. And I'd like to say that's a great thing. But the Jim Bognet I knew hated Donald Trump, I think, more than I did. He worked for Romney, and, Trump famously endorsed Romney, and he used to always blame me for this. Like, how could you let this happen? The truth of the matter is we didn't think it was a big deal, which I think is my fault. So Jim's just a guy who kind of never found his place in politics. He moved around the country working for races. He always worked for these moderate Republicans. I mean, that's who he was. And, he moved back home. I think his family has a business there and some money. And he's reinvented himself. And normally I wouldn't care about this. But when he says that Joe Biden didn't win the election, I mean, I know Jim Bognet. He's lying. He doesn't believe this in a million years. You hook him up to a lie detector test and it would fly off the table. He's just saying this because he thinks it'll help him. Now, a lot of people lie about stuff in politics, but when you lie about something as fundamental as democracy, and I don't know why the voters there would he's playing them for suckers. He thinks that he can just move back to Pennsylvania, say, well, I'm for Donald Trump. This race was stolen from me. It was stolen from you. I haven't lived here for, most of my adult life. I like to live in places, kind of hipster places like Austin in California. But hey, look, guys, you should believe me. They're playing, he's playing the voters for fools. And I hope that people realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I think that's very different than the kind of person that Matt Cartwright is. He's very involved in his community. He's a very you might not agree with his politics 100%, but a lot of people like him and trust him as a person. And I do think that'll show when we get to the end of this that Matt Cartwright is the right representative there.
Okay, that's good to hear. And we're about ready to wrap up. And I just kind of want to talk a little bit about, I did read something that the Fetterman campaign is hoping for people to vote early.
Yes.
Because they want to make sure that they're kind of out of the gate ahead of things. When are you expecting to kind of see and have a better idea of where these races are at?
I mean, we're doing vote by mail phone banks almost every other day, almost like a couple times a week. We probably won't have a real good idea until the week of, honestly. It's it's hard to say. Well, I'm hoping we have results at the end of the night.
But is the idea to keep the push going as if everybody's down?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Just want to remind everybody,
Yeah.
don't pay attention to polling. Just get active, which your organization, Let's Turn Pennsylvania Blue, is in need of volunteers. So can you talk a little bit about what you need? That way everybody watching at home can help contribute.
Yeah, we need all the volunteers we can get. We are in good. It sounds like we're in a good place, but you never know, right? We don't want a 2016 situation. So we need text bankers, we need phone bankers. If you're local, we need canvassers. We have canvasses happening in lots of places all over Pennsylvania. But if you don't live in PA, we can still use your help for phone banking and text banking. And you can just go to our website, turnpablue.org, and that'll get you all the shifts you can find.
Yeah, so everybody who's always asking, like, hey, my state's okay, but how can I help out another state? This is the beauty of the virtual internet world. And yes, so please, and you can also go to the union, jointheunion.us, because we're working with organizations all throughout the country to help them put volunteers in the right places. So you can, there it is, jointheunion.us. I think we've got like 50,000 volunteers, but we need more. We need so many more. So that is all the time we have for this evening, but we're spotlighting Pennsylvania this entire week. So there will be a Twitter Spaces, everyone, so you can tune into that on Wednesday. We'll continue to talk about Pennsylvania and the efforts there. But remember, everybody, we got to keep up the energy. We are so very close. This is the final stretch. And I know a lot of us, I know a lot of us are exhausted. There's days I wake up and I'm like, all right. Exactly. We're almost there. So it's like
4 more weeks. Yeah.
4 more weeks. Yes. Have a Gatorade. Less than 4 more weeks. And I'm literally counting down like every day. I'm like 29. So keep the energy up, y'all. Support each other. Talk to your neighbors. Stuart, I absolutely love the idea of talking to people in the cashier line at the grocery store. Go into Wegmans, talk about the veggie platter, not the crudité. And I honestly think, I'm like, why don't we have in the grocery stores, why don't we have aisles that are like the democracy aisle? Like if we're going to have ornaments up already, like Christmas ornaments, and I'm like, no, I want to see like pro-voting stuff. Like I want pro-voting aisle 5.
Veggie trees have become very popular in Pennsylvania circles recently for some reason.
Absolutely. It's healthy too. So that's great. It's like everybody can get healthy, talk about democracy at the grocery store, at the local restaurants, at the watering holes. Make it fun to talk about democracy, y'all, because if we lose it, it's not going to be fun at all. I can promise you that. Fascism bad, democracy good. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Everybody's handles are up there. Give them a follow. Interact with us on Twitter. We love to connect with everybody and have an amazing week. We made it through Monday. So we'll see everybody later.
Thank you.